This is WPSL Port St. Lucie, the talk of the Treasure Coast.
It's 11:07 at WPSL 1590, the talk of the Treasure Coast. You're on Ask a Rabbi.
And this is Rabbi Shafir Loeb of Congregation Eitz Chayim, your Jewish home on the Treasure Coast. There we go. Now I've got my headset on and I can actually hear. Yay, yay, yay. Okay. So, welcome. And last week I had said, and I actually remember, which is important, that we would talk about the right you left the piece of paper. It's a good thing I remembered. Yeah. We would talk about the right questions.
Yes.
So let me review what the right questions are, and that way we'll have some reference for it. So the right questions are a series of questions to use as you seek to find answers to problems. It's a way of redirecting the focus towards solution finding. All right. So one of the challenges when people complain, they are not solving a problem. They're becoming part of the problem, actually. Right? Complainers are people who typically, and like all generalizations, it's not always true, but complainers typically are folks who sit on the sideline who feel good because they've complained about something and they're quote unquote bringing people's attention to it. But what they're not doing is jumping in and solving it.
Yeah, it's like complaining about politicians and not voting.
Yeah. Or, complaining about the ecology and not recycling and not planting trees and not doing anything active. You become part of the problem. And the problem is people who don't solve problems. So that is the big story of the coming through the parting of the water. It's that people were staring at the Egyptians and complaining and not doing anything. What Moses does is not split the sea. Read the text, folks. It's the east wind. And we certainly know about east winds, and we're going to experience a southwestern wind here maybe. Hopefully not. Hopefully it'll continue to shift. It's been shifting, and no offense, folks out in the Caribbean, but you're welcome to it.
Yeah, that's right, yes.
It's and I recognize that, that I've chosen to live here in Florida, which, because we have the most coastline in the United States, we get the most hurricanes. And that's the reality, folks. It's not just because a lot of hurricanes have hit all over. They hit Texas, they hit Louisiana, certainly a lot in the Gulf, but they also hit up along the eastern coast. And those areas are very much not prepared, even though they really should be, if they're living on beachfront property or close to the water, as in the first so many miles of landfall. And recognizing, I've been in flooded fields in New York back in the days when we sold jewelry and art and showed dogs that were from hurricanes, because the backlash of rain that came through flooded the local areas and made them soggy.
Were you on one of the islands?
No, more like Finger Lakes area.
What?
Yeah, there have been times
all the way up there?
All the way up into there. Hurricanes can carry rain into the land, and the bigger problem is not so much the hurricane itself, which is horribly devastating and expensive, but the surrounding area gets much more rain, which is what we're looking at here in the current event.
Yeah, this should be a rain event.
It's a rain event, and rain events do a lot of damage too. Okay. So does snow melt, but that's a whole other story. And we know about that from even Tucson, because Tucson gets tremendous water out of snow melt. And the problem with that is you never know when it's going to melt and when it's going to hit.
Well, you can tell when the snow starts melting on Mount Lemmon, because Sabino Canyon turns into
a raging torrent.
Raging river.
And so do the other washes.
Yeah.
Right. So that's not a surprise for anyone. Well, it is for the folks who don't know Arizona and play in the rivers.
Oh, yeah. How many news stories did I do about people who tried to drive through arroyos?
Oh, Yeah. Yeah, I've watched cars being carried away. And they weren't arroyos. It's just not paying attention to the washes.
Yeah.
And they're called washes because they wash out periodically, folks. Yeah. Coyotes like to hunt in them, but they know to stay away because they can hear the water coming much sooner than we do.
Well, that's interesting.
Yeah, their ears are much better. But let's flip back and let's look at the right questions. Okay, so the problem, if you will, the bigger problem, is staring at problems instead of solving them. The amazing part about human beings, whether you take, regardless of how you view creation, how much evolution you look at or don't look at, and I'm saying this as both a rabbi and an engineer, regardless of where you are on the spectrum, we have this amazing brain on top of a couple of legs and arms that can solve tremendous problems, but only when we put our minds to it. And so that's a really important piece. I'm going to shift this just slightly. Watch me destroy everything.
She's got her own personal television camera.
I do. It's the one that shows on Facebook, and what's happening is that I can't get it down low enough with the current setup, but that's okay. Back to the right questions. The right questions start out this way. What's right? Now, they're called the right questions. It's not R-I-G-H-T. It's W-R-I-G-H-T for the person who came up with the formulation.
Oh, okay.
Okay. It just so happens that his name is Right. I can't help that. If his name was Jones, they'd be the Jones questions. But the first question is, what is right with the current situation? And that's important because we need to see what to grow from. And that's taking the difference between positive psychology and other psychologies is that positive psychology looks at your strengths and uses them to bridge, gap, strengthen the other aspects of your life. And the right questions does the same kind of thing with the situation. So what's right in the current situation? Sometimes that takes a lot of digging because it feels really bad, it feels really rough, whatever we're going through. And so the first question is, what's right? The second question is, what would be perfect? What would be wonderful? Let's take what's right and blossom it into a lot of stuff. And we're going to look at it in terms of like hurricanes and weather in a minute here. So what would be perfect? And then the third question is, what's the gap between what is and what would be perfect or wonderful? And then the fourth question, and this is the really hard one, what can I do to bridge that gap? Right. What can I do? And we can extend that if we're doing it as a group. What can we do? So you can either do it, what can I do? What can we do? So let's look at weather. And I think back to times when we used to talk about the Bermuda Triangle. We don't hear about planes disappearing anymore in the Bermuda Triangle.
No.
And one of the big reasons that happens is that we now have tremendous weather radar. I mean, we're tracking this baby across the Gulf. That wouldn't have happened. And you're talking about the chatter as I walked into the studio was about land crabs coming into the older studio, the birds and what they do before hurricanes. The animals recognize the changes in the environment. We're not so good at that. Our livelihood doesn't necessarily depend on it. But for birds, they can wipe out the weather can wipe out an entire colony if they don't prepare.
Oh, yeah, you bet.
And probably the same with land crabs. It wreaks tremendous havoc on highly localized populations. And I think back to the tsunami that came through Indonesia, rather. And there were some remote areas that had in their sacred story, their passed down tradition, that if the water rapidly leaves the shore, head to high ground.
Whoa.
And the entire
Really?
the groups did that. And so, what we probably can attribute that to is a few survivors from a prior event that passed it down, this piece of instruction. Don't be fooled. Don't go out and think you can get fish easy because they're beached. Right? They get caught in that first pullout, and they get stranded on the sand, and the temptation is, hey, free fish. Right? I can just go pick up fish instead of having to go work hard to fish. Not that fishing is hard work, but anyway.
Well, commercial fishing.
Yeah,
so.
commercial fishing certainly is. And so, that's the temptation, but then you're going to get caught in the tsunami wave that comes behind it.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
If you check Sacred Story Tsunami, it'll probably come up on Google. But it was an interesting piece at the time, and the description from people of it being a wall of water definitely brings to mind the story of the parting of the seas. But let's go back and let's look at what's right with the current situation, with weather, with hurricanes. I think that what's right is that we can track these things. Granted, it feels like throwing spaghetti at a map of Florida, but all right, that's because it's a complex event. Even the current one, look at how it's wobbling just off of land. It's not. You've got a beautiful picture up there of the radar.
Yes.
But if you did like the NOAA track of the storm center, you would see that it's not a straight line. The projections are all wonderfully straight with maybe a couple dog legs here and there. It certainly looks like it's going to obliterate the tip of Florida, doesn't it? Quite a bit of rain, and let's hope it. We're on the downside of it. I'm thinking of my plants. I'd like them to not drown, but hopefully we're not in the height, but we'll see where it goes because we don't really know. But the projections take a pretty good look at it. So what's right is the fact that we do have wonderful radar.
Oh, and it's just getting better every year.
And it's getting better every year. The projections are getting more accurate. We're starting to learn more about these phenomena. So what would be perfect? What would be perfect if we could safeguard the life in the path. You might say it's to stop the hurricane. And I'm going to say no. Hurricanes are part of the natural functioning of the planet. And if we've learned anything from history, please, folks, if we really change something like hurricanes, then we are going to alter the natural replenishment of the planet. And so the key is to, maybe we can attack the really high bad storms, the super bad storms in some way and lessen them. But I think we definitely need weather to bring, it's been pouring rain the past couple of days. My yard has gotten like less than three drops, I think. I had to go out yesterday and water plants because everybody else was raining, but we weren't.
Yeah, and goodness knows whether it's Palm Beach or us.
Yeah,
we're both at a deficit.
Yeah,
we need the rain,
and so we need these weather events to bring rain to places where it doesn't otherwise come.
Yeah, we don't need 10 inches of it.
Well,
but
there's an old story. I'm gonna take a sidebar, and then hopefully we'll come back to the right questions. The sidebar is this: the pilot humor. The pilot is flying late at night, and the electric goes out in the airplane. With the electric, of course, go the lights. And so the pilot tries to light a match or something like that, and of course, that doesn't work. And then he says, "Dear God, please provide some light." And with that, a crack of lightning flashes across the front of the aircraft. And the pilot says, "Thank you, God. Next time, a little less bright and a little longer."
Yes.
Right?
That works.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, So anyway, back to the right question. So what would be right would be if we could somehow, and we know how and what to do, folks. We really, really do. We know to build homes that will withstand the winds of a hurricane. I mean, look at the Hemingway house in Key West. It has been a direct target multiple times, and I don't think anything, they didn't even take the china in off the tables because they know that building is going to stay. So we know how to build buildings that are not ramshackle little put together nothings. It blows me away that right now we're looking for space for, this was a pre-COVID thing and we're doing it again. We're looking at what can be the temple's more permanent home.
Mm-hmm.
And we are considering, going to do this in 2 phases. One is going to be a small, not so permanent building, simple thing that will then hopefully turn into kind of a party center space as we build a final building somewhere down the road when it's the right time. It's not the right time right now, but a simple little building. And so one of the things that we're looking at is modular construction. And the modular companies, some of which are based in Florida, stress that their buildings are hurricane. They meet the hurricane code.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can do that with a modular home, folks, you can do it. It's, we know how and what to do. We know enough about the winds of a hurricane that we can protect things. We can protect things from hail. Will there be some damage? Yes. The point is to minimize it. It's not to eliminate it, I don't think. I don't think that's reasonable. But I think that a reasonable ideal would be to minimize damage, destruction, and harm to people. And so what can you do? The folks who do live in non-hurricane proof places do need a place nearby quickly that they can go to for shelter for a day or two. And we do need to find ways to improve our electric so that people are not out of power. But those are achievable goals if we direct our attention and energy toward them.
Yeah, and FPL has been hardening neighborhoods up and down
Yeah.
the coast of
They
Florida.
absolutely have. We've gotten the high poles, and it's worth noting, right on 95, the lights can come down on the light poles so that